I took a 1.5 ounce shot glass, put the Irish Mist in it, not quite full, and put a tablespoon of lemon juice in. And because I had heard that this could work, you can't believe how well that works. It actually, I don't know what it breaks it all up, and I guess you swallow your snot is what it boils down to, and your voice sounds normal again. I don't know.
Roger, Roger. Well, maybe I should get some of that, and we'll be on the same frequency, Roger.
Very possibly, but I was surprised at that. It's called Irish Mist, which is a honey whiskey liqueur, and you put a tablespoon of lemon juice in a, well, you start with a lemon juice. You put a tablespoon of lemon juice in a shot glass, fill the shot glass the rest of the way with the Irish Mist, and then you basically put it in, swirl it around, almost don't gargle with it, but almost as if you're going to do that, swirl it around in your throat, and then swallow, and it clears you right out.
Roger, Roger. Now, I've heard of putting a little rum in your coffee. That helps.
Now, this is similar, but it's not like do this 4 times a night. It's like do it, and it should clear you out. W3JMD.
Kc9Vkv, put me in for a bottle.
Does that work to help sneezing?
If you've never tried Irish Mist, it's a great liqueur. Like I said, it's an Irish whiskey mixed with honey.
You got a lot of static up there tonight, Jim?
Yeah, it's not awful, but yeah, there is a lot. Earlier on, it was worse.
I'm getting about 4 or 5 dB hits above my noise level. I guess it's not too bad yet.
Jim, I got to clear out here. You and Blue, those damned horses are over here again. I'll see you. KS8ED, clear.
Take care, Jim. 7-3, and we should probably reserve that comment to email and just say issues again, and not worry about it, because you got all those that have to know, and it's not even that I have to know, but you have been informing me all the way along. So 7-3, Jim. Take care. Have a great evening, and do what you got to do. Take care. I hate to plant a garden. I wouldn't even call it a garden. A field with potatoes or onions or whatever you plant, and then come out the next day and find out that everything you did in terms of tilling, planting, and the whole bit, and the acres that you had done is destroyed. I would hate to be able to wake up the next morning and look at the field and see that everything you had just done the day before was destroyed.
What destroyed it?
We can call it owned horses. I'm going to call it wild horses. A person's neighbor has horses, but they don't feed them. And their fields don't have anything to feed them with. They don't even have them fenced properly, and they've busted down the fences of the adjoining property and busted down the fences surrounding the field that has the plantings. And they're looking for food. And, you get to be in a total quandary as to what you can do. And when you find one that's basically got himself wrapped up in your net, the netting, whatever you want to call it, fencing netting that you put around your field, because this new stuff is like plastic, it's not metal. And the horse is all wrapped up in it, and he broke his leg in it, the whole bit. What do you do with a horse? It's your neighbors, but they don't take care of it. It's like they just let them do whatever they do. And you've talked to them a number of times. What do you do? And this horse is like, they're not even going to take him to a vet. But the horse is sitting, just all wrapped up in the fence, which he's destroyed, and he's broke his leg. What do you do with it?
Roger, Roger. Well, you get to a point you have to take legal action.
you do the most humane thing possible, is what you do.
Shoot the neighbor.
Well, I guess I could say that, but it's more complicated. The horses are owned by the neighbor's ex. The neighbor's ex is throwing the responsibility onto her ex, who is basically saying, they're your horses, you need to take care of them. And she's saying, well, they're on your property. In other words, you got a battle between two people that have gone through a divorce, and they're the neighbors, and it's like, what do you do?
Yeah, Roger, get sucked into their deal. Can you divorce your neighbors?
Well, sometimes I guess one would want to do that. I am fortunate. I have two great neighbors on either side of me, as direct neighbors. Even the people across the street, et cetera, et cetera. We don't have problems with the neighbors around here. Fortunately. I've seen the battles between other neighbors around here, and I just shake my head. It's like, why are you guys getting wrapped up in stupid shit? Yeah, the dogs bark. Well, they keep me up all night. Well, I hear them too, but it's like, close your windows or something. You don't hear them.
Roger. Well, I have a rent-to-own property in back of my house, and it's like there have been probably 20 people that have rented to own in there, and unbelievably, 3 of them have had what are those little doggies that make yips? 2 of them, gosh, what are they? You know the Chihuahuas. 3 sets of Chihuahuas in that house. And those things reach unbelievable decibels.
Oh, geez. One of my friends from back home, they had a Chihuahua. And it's like, you look at this little rat dog, because that's what it is, it's a rat dog. And it's like trying to chew your, ankle off. And it's like, what the hell? And it's like, be reserved, be as kind and nice as possible, and let rat dogs yip all around you. I do not like Chihuahuas.
Well, and then when you have a pair of them, they're twice as, it's just continuous. Like, usually if you have one, it makes noise, takes a breath, makes noise, But when you have 2 of them, there's no even breath separation. It's just constant.
I remember talking to my friend, it's like, Jeff, every time I come over, your dog is trying to bite my ankle. Don't worry, that shows he likes you. And I'm like, Jeff, to me that's not a way of showing that you like somebody.
Well, I guess maybe that was up from his neighborhood, where as a kid where he grew up, maybe just a dogs biting at your ankles was better than getting shot at or something,
I don't know. At one point I looked at him and said, Jeff, I'd like to basically drop kick your dog. And he just, his expression was, and it was like, never do that again, never say that again, and apologize, which I did. And I said, oh, it's just a joke. Jeff, I was joking.
But I'll tell you what, now, all things considered, Chihuahuas are very loud, but twice now, the families in the back have had roosters. And one of them had mini roosters. So it wasn't a matter of raising, for eggs. These guys were raising for war, for gaming.
Well, we do have neighbors with roosters. Yes, we hear the roosters crowing in the morning, or crowing out, roosting, whatever the hell they do. Roosterating in the mornings. We do hear that. And that's okay, that's fine. They do their thing when the sun comes up and even beforehand. But they have chickens and they have eggs. And, when you got a neighbor that comes over and hands you a couple dozen eggs, you are not going to complain about the rooster.
Good night, Jim.
Did you say good night?
Yeah, 7-3 Jim and 7-3 the other station. DA3LG.
Good night, Ron. 7-3 W3JMD, and happy to hear you in here.
Don't run off, Ron. This is just getting warmed up here.
Yeah, I'm tired. Maybe some other time. I had a long day. I need some sleep. 7-3 DA3LG.
Roger, Roger, 3s.
Understand, Ron. Yeah, no, my neighbor, this is my old neighbor. This is Jim. This is what's strange. I live 3 doors down from here. 3 doors. What's that? I don't know, about 1/8 a mile, quarter mile. Yeah, because this is out in the country and everybody has multiple acres. So, I go through a divorce, living 3 doors down, which means I get ordered out of the judge. Or you will vacate the house and you will put it up for sale. And I look at the judge. It's like, can I stay there until it's sold? No, you must vacate now. Okay, we will do that. This is going to be a problem, but okay. You don't have a choice. The judge orders it. You don't have a choice. Well, anyway, we sold the house. Blah blah blah. Meantime, I got another job, working someplace else. Met a very delightful lady, my wife now, and we were out looking for houses, especially with the kid on the way, because where we were at did not have enough room for a kid. So we were looking for houses, and we're out looking this way. We're on the other side of the state, but we're looking out this way. Because she knew I liked the country and whatnot, and she's willing to give it a try. So I was just throwing my hands up in the air. It's like the realtors, just like when I first got my house the first time. They don't listen to you. Somebody says, here, check this place out, and it's like nothing that the realtor came up with, but the realtor, oh, well, we'll represent it. All right, yeah, you need your commission, I guess. So we had kind of dropped the other realtors, and the wife was just out trolling about, riding around trying to see what she could find. So she finds this place, and she's not telling me anything about it. She says, I found the place, and I want you to take a look, and you tell me what you think. So she's driving down the road, and I just told her, stop the car, stop right now, stop the car. She does, and it's at the edge of my old property. And she's like, what? And I says, look to your right. She's like, okay. I used to live there. I lived there for like 5 or 6 years. And she's like, actually more than that. And she's like, what? I said, that's where I live. That was my house. She said, I didn't know that. So I said, where are we going? She says, not too much further. Well, not too much further was like 1/8 of a mile. And she says, this is the place where I'm talking about. And I'm like, holy crap, I know everybody in the neighborhood. This is the whole area, neighborhood. I know everybody along the stretch here, up and down. I know these people. So she's like, you don't have a problem? I said, no. They're all friends. I was quite delighted. And basically the builder had just broken ground. He hadn't even started with a house. So at that point, it was like, what do you want for the house? And so we went through the whole list and chose one of the houses he builds, and that's what got put up.
Roger, Roger. Well, you know the old expression, it's a small world.
Well, it blew my wife away because when we moved in, I said, you don't need to worry. We have friends all around us. And I said, the people across the street, I know them very well. There was a house directly across the street. There was a house being built. I didn't know them, but just a little cat corner to it, I knew him, and he owned the farm that all of this land had come from. So I knew Matt. Yeah, his name is Matt. If you're still in here, his name is Matt, and the wife she became friends in the community immediately because it was like, okay, they remembered me, and and it was kind of cool. So anyway, it was just one of those things, and I just couldn't believe that she found a place within, yards, we'll call it, of where I used to live, and it's been a great experience back here.
Roger. Well, you have to admit it definitely seems like a case of destiny, and it's something that you would have never thought of on your own to move into that area. So it had to be destiny,
Well, it was something because she knew I lived out here somewhere. I didn't go into detail with here's the town and on and on and on, or any of that, because it's like your new wife doesn't need to know all the crap that regarding the ex and everything else. So I never went into it, and it was like new beginning, that whole thing. But when she found this house out, where the house would be, and it's going to be built to our liking, and what do you think of this place? I just was like, unbelievable. This is, as you put it, destiny. So right away, when the neighbors found that I moved back into the neighborhood, it was like a reacquaintance with all the old friends.
Roger. Now, another thing would be in talking to each other, there'd be long expanses of time when nobody says anything, and then like a conversation on the phone, long time nobody says anything, and then all of a sudden both start to speak at the exact same time. I think that's in the area of harmony, destiny, harmony, it all. I guess when you're in harmony, your destinies are a lot better than when you're out of phase with the other party.
Rupert Sheldrake. I don't buy into any of his theories, but there was a guy named Rupert Sheldrake, and he wrote this book called Morphic Resonance. But it's interesting because it basically discusses exactly what you're referring to.
Morphic resonances, is that correct?
That's correct. Morphic resonance. M-O-R-P-H-I-C. Morphic resonance. And it's about how the universe has memory, and he goes through a whole bunch of examples on it. And I don't buy into his theories, but it's very interesting, etc., because it's something that we've seen, but didn't have a name for it. So what I will do is I will say, yes, all of that comes under morphic resonance.
Give me an example of just a basic aspect of that.
For the longest time, and I didn't basically researched this. This was something, my brother read the book and he gave me all the examples on it, so I did the quickie, what is it, version of it. There's there were the, if you were supposed to read a book for literature class, there were the quickie ways of going through it. I read the quickie version of his book. Anyway, my brother gave an example, and I didn't look up anything on it. He said, well, here's an example of what morphic resonance represents. He said, for the longest time, take glycerin, the substance that you can get at a pharmacy and stuff, one of the prime ingredients of making nitroglycerin. He said, take glycerin. They couldn't freeze it. No matter how cold they got, they just weren't freezing it. He said, well, they found a drum of glycerin that had actually gone solid, so it was frozen. He says, after that, glycerin was freezing everywhere, and they could freeze glycerin, and they put a temperature on it after that of the freezing point of glycerin. And I'm looking at my brother, and I'm saying, what? They didn't have refrigerators that were capable of going that low? What? He said, no, that's not the point. The point is, it just wasn't freezing until this point in time, and after that point in time, they've noticed that they could freeze it at will afterwards. And he said, what happened there is considered morphic resonance. The universe learned that, glycerin could be frozen, and as such, glycerin could be frozen at will now by man. And I would look at my brother, and I just said, okay. But I never looked it up. I had other things I was dealing with at the time, so I never looked it up and don't think that I will. But that was an example he gave. In other words, morphic resonance is the learning of something that the universe does, and afterwards it's understood and known. It's like, nobody noticed crows being able to take the old glass bottles of milk, where you had the milkman deliver them. The crows never got into them until at one point some woman noticed that, hey, a crow had pulled that sort of a semi-cardboard manila folder type sized insert that they put in the top, had pulled it out and was able to get in and drink the cream off the top. And after that experience, it was noticed everywhere in the U.S. that the crows were doing this. And my brother said that was one of Rupert Sheldrake's examples of the crows all learning at the same time, and it was morphic resonance. So that's the term he gave it. Like I said, I don't view it that same way, but it's like people now become accustomed to looking for something, and they see the examples that have always been there, but they never recognized them before. W3JMD.
Kc9Vkv. I think I see your point there. It's the learning of something and realizing that it is entirely possible to achieve that point. It's kind of like when I did my sloping inverted V's, got them down to, they got the first one down to 1.01 to 1. The realization that could occur by using the formula of doing SWR adjustments on the negative side and bringing it on frequency on the positive side, that works, and you can walk that down to a 1.01 to 1. It's a learning curve, but once you understand that how to do it, then you as an entity can do it. But I guess when you're in a community with other people and they see that happen, then, and it could be to some degree the power of positive thinking, all of those people understanding it and contributing their positive wavelengths to achieving that goal.
That's more to what I would attribute it to, is that if somebody were to say, oh, the Russians have come up with the ability to hover a craft, basically levitate, without the use of propellers or magnetism, that they could levitate a craft. Just the simple fact that that's acknowledged would have people in this country, for instance, driving themselves to replicate whatever the Russians did, even though we have no more information other than they levitated something, and that the belief is now that it could be done. Once the belief is that it could be done, people will drive themselves a little further to push the barriers, push the boundaries, and otherwise that would allow levitation, something that would negate gravity and have something hover. And so, I will liken it to that, because once a person believes that something can be done, they'll go a little bit further in order to do it.
Oh, roger that. And it's the same way with radio and, communications, transmissions. Folks coming along, Alexander Graham Bell, Marconi, DeForest, all them guys fed off each other. I mean, they took, where one guy takes the ball to a certain place, the other guy comes along, grabs the ball and takes it, you know, to the next plateau, and that's all a matter of positive thinking about a particular subject matter.
Exactly, and really what it comes down to is, do you believe it's doable first off? And if you believe it's doable, and enough people believe it's doable, somebody's going to find their way to do it.
Roger. Yes. Otherwise, we'd be we'd be talking in our sleep instead of on the radio.
Well, otherwise we'd not have any of this. It's simply because of the belief that man has that he can do that next step. And but Rupert Sheldrake, that's his name, RUPERTSHELDREKE, I believe. And gave a term to it called morphic resonance, wrote a book on it, and if you throw out all of his, I just can't buy into, well, the universe learned, therefore the force, the force be with you, that type of thing, and therefore now it is doable because the universe learned how to do it. I don't buy into that part, but I do buy into the part that once man has allowed himself to believe it's doable in this fashion, that he finds a way to do it.
Roger. Well, I mean, amateur radio is built on the fact that you can do it. I mean, and it's accepted that you can do it. Otherwise, people, if they didn't, well, just like trying to work California between midnight and 3 a.m., I did that 3 or 4 times, in 1 week, and so I'm saying to myself, hey, a KW at on 80 meters at midnight is going to be right in the 2,000-mile range.
Well, something blew me away about 9 months ago. I think that was about right, 9. Could have been a little longer, but in that time frame. A friend, and he sent me an email, and he said, Jim, go down to this frequency. There's a guy from Hawaii there. I just talked to him and just had a contact with a guy from Hawaii. It's on 75 meters here, but he's on this frequency. See if you can contact him. Okay. So I go down, and when he's, there's a lot of traffic, and when he's done, I said, is so-and-so here, this call sign? Yes. I said, I would just like to say hello, make a contact. And he came back with one phenomenal signal, and we had a very short QSO, but one occurred indeed. Now, the guy that told me this had an indoor vertical in his, running 100 watts indoor vertical. He talked to him on sideband. Like I said, it was 9 months ago. It blew me away.
This was an indoor antenna?
Well, the guy in Hawaii had a hell of a station there. He had a great, nice beam and everything else. But the guy that sent me the email was on Long Island. He lived on Long Island, and he had just got done talking to him, and he says, Jim, you got to check this out. But what he had was a I have to kind of go, holy shit. He had would go on the back of your vehicle, a car, basically a mobile antenna to the inside of his apartment house where he was at. And he talked to the guy in Hawaii on that, sideband. So it was like, and he goes, you can't believe how strong the guy is, and the report he gave me was 5.9 plus. So I was like, wow, I got to check this out. And I was blown away. It was like there was a pipeline between here and there.
Roger, and I've experienced that on 10 meters, when 10 meters used to open up. It hasn't in a while, but when I first became a tech, I spent my first year, or 2 years, on 10 meters, and it was opening up every day almost. And I would start at 28,400, and there was a guy out in San Diego that monitored 28,400, so we'd start with a good morning, you know, every morning, almost, like a direct pipeline to not only San Diego, but to this guy's specific QTH. It's just amazing.
See, now, when I first became a ham, and that was back in 1969, that was, I guess, the Solar Peak area then, and a friend, one that had prodded me to become a ham, that was in the radio club in high school there. I was 9th grade, he was in 10th, and I'd go over his place now and again, and I think it was a Friday night, and he's running just a few watts AM on 10 meters, and we're talking to a guy in California as if he was right there next door to us. And it was a Friday night. I was blown away. Yeah, 1 or 2 watts talking Q5 to people in California. And what did they have? It was called the Star Trek net. The reason I chuckle is I was not allowed to watch Star Trek as a kid. It's not a matter of, I shouldn't say that. I didn't get to watch Star Trek as a kid. We had one TV in the house, one. And it was what my father said we were watching is what got watched, and Star Trek was never watched. I guess that was on I don't even remember what night that was, but Star Trek was not watched.
Oh man, that's a crime against humanity right there.
Well, I was like, he's an engineer, and what he said went. I don't know if it was up against Gunsmoke or one of those shows that he liked, or he just decided because where he worked, and you know how engineers are, they all get together and conspiracy theories run rampant. Star Trek is part of the globalist overall conspiracy, and they always have this, that, or the other thing. It was like Disney movies. As kids, we were not allowed to watch the Disney movies.
Wow, now that's another crime against humanity.
So, you know, and you just don't question. As a kid, you don't question. Dad says this, okay, well, that's the way it is. You know, and in a lot of respects, Dad was right, you know. Was Dad wrong ever? Let's say he was mistaken a few times. I don't want to say Dad was wrong, but he was mistaken a few times.
Well, now, out of curiosity, what was his take on Jerry Seinfeld?
Geez, honestly, I don't know. I didn't watch, I was too busy doing other things that I couldn't get into the evening, at that point in time, I couldn't get into the evening soap operas, because that's what, you know, Seinfeld was a soap opera in its own right, as was Dallas and a number of other things that occurred in the evening. I only watched Seinfeld on occasion. I never talked to my father about Seinfeld.
Roger. Well, I mean, I think, you know, Seinfeld has come back into a renaissance of his, you know, syndication now quite lucrative, I'm sure.
He was retired also, so I don't know that it would have mattered, but I don't recall him talking about Seinfeld, nor my mother for that matter. And when I would go over and would be there for, you know, a few days at a time, you know, it's like one of those things. You know, I'm the oldest, so what does going back to Mom and Dad's house mean? It means bring your tools with you. You got a lot of things to fix.
Hey, right. I can see his point as I have become older, looking for my son to return with his tools.
So whenever I went to visit back home, I always brought a bunch of tools with me and bought others and would leave them there, only to find they weren't there the next time I visited, as somebody grabbed them. Yeah, well, I'm not even going to venture to guess. But yeah, I would try to bring a complete set of tools. What I didn't bring with me, I would buy at the local hardware store and leave them there with Dad, because I probably had those at home too. And only come back the next time to find they weren't there. And it was like, oh well, because there was no point in even asking, because it would be like, I don't know, did you leave them there? You know, that kind of thing. Did you really leave them there? And it's like, Dad, I might as well just say, Dad, I know you gave them to so-and-so or so-and-so. but it was like no point in that. But as the oldest, it was expected of me. I had, Jim, we got problems with this screen door. We got a problem with this. Basically, they had a list of things for me to go through and fix. My brother would get there. My brother might get there before but he's 4 years younger. And it's like, oh yeah, your friends called already. They want to meet you tonight. I'd get there and it'd be like, Jim, you got to take. We've had problems with the following, and I'd be like, can I meet my friends sometime? Well, can you take care of this stuff first? It's like, oh shit.
It's the toilet that needs a little attention. Oh, well, you know, you're talking about Star Trek now, and you didn't get to see it as a kid. Do you now feel like you were deprived of an intrinsic part of your younger education?
No, and I'll tell you, because there were so many reruns on it, I did get to see all of them, probably more than once. And do I feel deprived? No. Basically, I didn't want to watch what the others were watching, so I would, what would I do? I'd go in the basement and start working on other things. What was that? Stuff that could probably hurt me.
Oh, roger that. So, did that, do you think, led to your interest in electronics?
Oh, absolutely. Among other things, absolutely. It basically, you know, gave me new perspectives on a number of things because I wasn't interested in seeing what was on. Because it could have been Little House on the Prairie for all I know. I don't remember. And that wasn't on at the time, but as an example. So it would be like, all right, you wanted to make this or you wanted to make that. Okay, and it would be gather up all the materials that are down there and make it with what's there.
Roger, roger. So there it is, a classic case of morphic resonance. When you realize that you have the capability of achieving certain things in building, like in electronics, that adds to your ability to build the next thing. So, and, you know, I was thinking about morphic resonance as a group thing, you know, that all these people would see something and then they would, you know, act upon it. But on an individual basis, morphic resonance would apply.
Oh, it applies both ways. It applies in a group sense and as an individual sense. I just looked at the time. It's not that I'm going to drop out or anything, but I'm wondering if Mike got back. If Mike is listening now and chuckling. Are you there, Michael? He's been out with that dog, walking that damn dog for 2 hours. He's got to be back.
You calling me? I can barely hear you. I hear the other Jim just fine. Mr. Fergusson, howdy, howdy, good morning. N2LYM.
Hey, I'm copying you real good tonight.
Yeah, Jim's close to me, so obviously the band went long.
Roger, roger that.
I've got to fix my antenna. I've got a number of dB of loss between here and the antenna because I have waterlogged, absolutely freaking waterlogged coax that needs to be replaced.
Now it's going to show up as SWR, does it?
In a sense it does. In a sense it does. But because the losses are the way they are, it just skews everything. And it shows up as SWR, it shows up as a number of things, and but it's there. What it really is, what it boils down to, is I'm cooking water in the coax.
Yeah, it's a big attenuator is what it is.
And apparently pretty flat.
Well, that's the cage dipole, the illegal antenna.
Microwave dummy.
Well, take a bird and put it on one end, and then take a bird and put it on the other end, and then into a dummy load, and then compare the two birds to find out what your loss is.
Yeah, I used to just take a spool of RG-174, throw it in the bucket, and that was it.
I got something that's really cool here. I have trained the son, my boy. I've trained him in how to cut the grass when you have coax sitting at ground level, so that you don't basically make coax McNuggets. And he does it quite well, actually.
Now, does he mow down the coax or across the coax?
It's got to be down the coax, because the deck, whatever the deck is, sits slightly lower than the blade. Not a whole lot, but slightly. So basically he'll cut around the run where the coax is. And then he'll position himself without the blades, spinning. And then he'll turn the blades on, and then he'll go do what I'll call the cut right above where the coax is, centered on it, because this coax itself stays below the blade height. And I told him, I says, when we need to do this, it's got to be done for one season. At the end of the season, the coax is going to be grabbed by the grass, and it does this. The grass actually does this. It runs the runners and the shoots of the grass go over the coax, and they pull it into the ground. By the third season, the coax is no longer visible. It's underground.
Roger, Roger. So he mows longwise, and that the deck actually rides on the coax?
The deck rides on the coax. There are wheels on the front center, and he stays centered. That keeps it pushed, and I have coat hangers that are bent into a U, about 6 inches on either side, pushing down, and I keep the coax right at ground height, so the blade shouldn't hit it. But you don't want to run across it at a 90-degree angle, because the possibility is that you'll be at such a level that you might, how you scalp the ground occasionally. Well, scalping the ground would just basically chew the coax to hell and back. So if you ride directly over top of it, parallel with it, in other words, you're going right along top of it, the deck itself keeps it below the height of the blades.
Roger. Now, I've heard people do that with ground radios, Of course, that's a lot smaller diameter thing, like number 12s or number 14s for ground radios, Of course, coax is like half-inch item, so I'm amazed that works that way.
Well, again, the coat hangers help, because I cut a bunch of coat hangers, the old coat hangers, that nice steel wire. That's about, 10, 12 gauge steel wire. I cut about 1 foot lengths of it, and bend it into a U, and push it in the ground and step on it so it holds the coax at ground level. And I do that every 4 feet or so along the coax. And literally within, at the end of the first season, if you do it in spring, by the end of the year, that coax is now being held firmly to the ground by the shoots that the grass throw over. And by the end of the second season, you're lucky to find any coax visible. By the third season, it's all underground. And after that, it goes down to a depth of about 2 inches. It's pulled down to a depth of about 2 or 3 inches under the ground. And my unfortunate thing was I had some connections that were underneath the ground. And now after, 2001 to now, 17 years, 16 years, the coax has become waterlogged. Yes, I know that's the case. I had checked the other section, and it's like nice and green in there, copper turning green, it's oxidized. Okay, it's been got water ingress. I know this is the problem along that main stretch, and so I got to replace it. Not a big deal, just it's a matter of doing it.
Roger. Not, nowhere near the problem on HF as it is on the internet frequencies. The cable drops for your TV and all that stuff. you know, as always, waves travel on the outer surface of the center conductor, and what happens is you get this oxidation built up, and at those frequencies, it's well, this guy, a buddy of mine, a new buddy of mine, I was having computer problems, and he was a cable guy, you know, and he looked at my line before he got here, and when he got here, he said, you know, your drop is terrible. It's you're losing half your signal before it gets to your house. And he did a drop all the way, you know, from the pole in, and man, it just made an unbelievable difference.
Well, here's what I did. When the cable guy came out, every time they, you know, depending, you know, whatever, I would try to be here and with him. So when he was making the new connections and everything like that, I'd say, okay, hold on, before you screw that in, let me do something. And I had a tube of dielectric grease, silicon dielectric grease. And I would fill the male connector with it and kind of give it a little squirt around the female side. I said, okay, now screw it in. He said, what did you just do? I said, what I just did is I stopped any water ingress or oxidation from occurring. Once that's screwed in, it's not going to oxidize. You're going to have metal-to-metal contact on the connector, the female side to the male side, and it's not going to have water oxidizing it and causing problems down the road. And he's like, why don't they give this to us? And I said, well, because then you get sent out again, and it's cheaper to not use it. But in reality, this is what you want to do. And so on all of the cable connections going into the house, everything's been squirted with dielectric grease so that there'll be no ingress of oxidation, water, or otherwise. And we left it at that. And I basically showed the guy, he wrote down the numbers and everything. What he came back with, he says, I want to give you something. I'm like, okay. And he gave me a cable cutter. I'm like, you know, this is one of those things where you clamp it over the coax cable, and with your thumb or finger, spin it around, you know, once or twice, and it cuts the outer insulation off. And then you can do another cut, which will basically do the part that goes into the center conductor. So it's nice, one of these nice, really nice spring-loaded things that they use that gives them the ability to instantly cut the coax and trim it properly for the crimp-on connections that they're using. And he said it has a dull, you know, the edge on it's dull. So I tore the thing apart, and it's not supposed to be torn apart in that way. And it's like, oh, there's the razor blade, and I have some nice 4,000 and 8,000 grit whetstones, and I put a new edge on the razors, stuck it back on the razor, stuck it back in, and that's what I used for my coax. But that was because I showed him how you stop the oxidation from occurring and have a problem-free set of connections at the customer end, but it requires you to buy tubes of this dielectric grease, which I stick in all the coax connectors and everything else. But 18 years later, hell yeah, water finds its way in. And my stupid mistake was having the connections underground. The next run is going to go 4 foot up the mast before it does a drip loop, and still have itself in a enclosure where it's not going to get water on it, and then loop over back and go up the mast up to the connection at the antenna. And this way, if anything that needs replaced, the only thing that needs replaced is the mass length of antenna, you know, cable going to the antenna. And well, I've noticed I've got at least 3 or 4 dB of loss now through my coax, which I didn't have before. So that's the issue on my side. W3JMD in babble mode.
Kc9Vkv. Yeah, and if you do have to make a inline connection, just put it on a pedestal, you know, bring it up above ground on a pedestal or something, and then back under, but you leave your connection you know, 18 inches or so above the ground.
Yes, I've also pondered on that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go from, I have a loop of about 8 turns, 2 foot in diameter, maybe 1.5 feet in diameter before it comes into the house. And all that is another way of saying, okay, I'm going to have a common mode choke before it goes into the house. When I make the connection there, it's going to be a direct run all the way out to the mast and go up about 4 feet, and it's going to be enclosed in PVC with a 90-degree elbow at the top, and the connection will be inside the elbow. So what I'm going to essentially do is make sure that I waterproof all of the areas. Nothing's going to be underground like I have now. That was a dumb thing to do, but hey, it lasted 17 years. I shouldn't complain.
Roger. The other thing would be to put it in rock, you know, pebbles, like 10 inches below and 10 inches above. The connection is in pebbles, so water just runs through.
Well, when I made the initial runs and stuff like that, I didn't have a backhoe, and at this point, no, I'm not going to dig up the yard in order to, run some PVC conduit all the way out to the antenna. I'm going to do it the same way as before. It'll be basically laying on the surface with a little U-clamps, if you will, of coat hanger, and allow it to pull itself into the ground and rely upon that outside vinyl or whatever coating they put on the coax to be secure in terms of not allowing water ingress. And then the connection itself will be above ground at the other side with that U connection at the end. So drip loop and everything there. In other words, there won't be any ingress of water in the coax unless there's some micro slit or something like that in there that I didn't see. I don't believe that will be the case, but that's how we're going to play the next run. In all honesty, 18 years from now, I'll be 81 years old. I don't know if I'll be on the amateur radio at all.
Yeah, I was talking to this guy the other day about his solid-state amplifier, you know, and we were thinking, 20 years of operation would, you would be able to determine the ability of the amplifier to stay together in a 20-year period, and he said, well, I've got 13 years on this, and everything's fine, and I'm 82. So I really have a dilemma, if I, manage to make it to the point that 20 years, it's a long story, but he liked his solid-state amplifier.
I think that's definitely the way everything's going to go, absolutely. My amplifier here is a tube amplifier. It's got the same tube in it as when I bought it 27 years ago, and it's still running the same tube. I don't know. Do I need to worry? I have a backup tube. I have a spare tube for it. I've tried it out. It's full output. In other words, it's doing a little teeny bit better than the one I have in there now. And the one that's in there now, well, after 27 years, it's starting to drop a little bit in emissions. Not a lot, but some. And as far as most people would be concerned, they could say, oh, full output, it's full emissions, it's full output. I stick the other tube in there, which I have to do on occasion, just to make sure it's gathered properly. Do I need to worry about another amplifier? Probably not. If I do other amplifiers, it's simply because I want to do the fun of messing around with a little bit of electronics now and again. So, it's in all honesty, Jim, it's a large come to grips with situation when you say, you know what, things that were important before are not as important now simply because I'm not going to be around. after a certain number of years. I'm not going to be here. So I don't know that I need to concern myself as much with it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, things, when you reach a certain point, you realize you're not concerned when you have malfunctions. You realize that tomorrow you will be able to fix it, you know. Whereas in your younger days, you had to fix it immediately, that it was a major problem and that you felt insecure for the duration of the downness of the piece of equipment. But, you know, when you I guess it's maturity of age, you know.
It's establishing another set of priorities that give you a realization that you don't have to do certain things right now. It's where when you start to get an honest grip on what are your real priorities in life. Well, it's you know, yeah, it's me, but that's only a part of it. It's not just me, it's my wife. If she's happy, I'm generally happy. So I strive to make her happy. It's my son. Are things going along, you know, along okay with him? The two kids that have graduated are no longer in the house. How about them? Well, they're doing quite well, so I don't have as much concern or energy I need to put that direction. What about my other daughter? Well, she spends half her time here, and she seems to be quite happy now doing so. Half her time here, half her time at her place. And that's cool. I don't have a problem with that. It's a great way of transitioning. And the son, seeing his sister, you know, his immediate sister, you know, transitioning this way is actually it's a lot easier on all of us. So those are actually more priority than whether my amplifier is working up to snuff.
Roger that. Roger. Well, speaking of your amplifier, you are. I'm looking at your audio on a VU meter, which I always do. I look at my audio and your audio. I'm just constantly looking at the VU meter, and you right now are. Your voice peaks are 15 dB above the noise level, so you're doing an unbelievably good job. But I'm running out of steam, so I'm going to have to jump out. But I will, you know, we have been doing our Qso-Vlog, obviously, and I will entitle this Qso-Vlog Morphic Resonance. How about that?
Okay, again, it's not a theory I buy into. In its overall sense, but I found it interesting because it explains a lot in terms of human nature, more so than not. It explains a lot in terms of human nature. When a person realizes that something can be done in a certain way, that person, that tribe, whatever, will go an extra mile or so in order to reproduce it, especially if it's to some tribal/militaristic or other advantage, and that's how we learned as humans. But as far as universe learning, well, because we found a 55-gallon drum of glycerin in a solid form, that all of a sudden the universe learned that glycerin could freeze. No, I don't buy into that. That part I don't buy into, but. It's an interesting theory overall, and it's worth a look at just to give a person another perspective. Anyway, Jim, 7-3, and have a great evening and great weekend ahead of you. You take care. W3JMD, I will be listening out, and QRT shortly thereafter.
Roger, Roger, Jim. Well, you know, Rembrandt, Monet, Picasso, they may be forerunners of the morphic resonance phenomenon. We'll have to see. Threes, have a good night, sir. Catch you later. Kc9Vkv, be clear.